this is fantastic. Friend of the show, Brian Tyler Cohen, did an interview with billionaire Mark Cuban, and you can see how much people are enjoying this by even just the views. 2.4 million views. So as we watch this, just think millions of people being delivered this message to them by Mark Cuban, who delivered quite the beatdown of Donald Trump. And I think it hits differently for Trump from someone who's not a lifelong hardcore liberal and who's a billionaire and who has some of those credentials that Trump is obsessed with. And he did not hold back. Let's start with this.
As bad as lack of ethics, lack of character, lack of honesty is, the fact that he makes no effort to learn anything. This is one of the few human beings on the planet that get dumber in front of our face every single day. It's not like you can't think of one thing where it says, I think, you know, that's really smart, right? Or that's really nuanced, or he really understood that topic with some depth.
Yeah. Not
one time. And that's what's so maddening and infuriating about the whole thing. And I get, like, I had a friend when he first ran. I said, how can you vote for this guy? And I told him stories that I've, you know, experiences I've had with him. He goes, Mark, let me tell you something. I've been voting for politicians my entire life. You know what they've ever done for me? Nothing.
I'll stop it there. But a lot more to look at. And that's not one that I spend as much time on. But wow. It's wild the way that he put it, because there's so many consequential, massive reasons that we have to vote against Trump. Our democracy being the most important one. But it is disturbing how Trump exhibits, like someone I've, like, as Mark Cuban was saying, like I've never seen before. This unwillingness, this aggressive opposition to learning. He won't learn about anything. He won't correct himself about things. He won't figure out some facts so that he can, in the next interview, make more sense. He gets asked about childcare and spins out. I haven't seen him clarify a childcare position since then. He says the 1917 flu over and over instead of 1918, and no one ever corrects him. Or he gets corrected and he doesn't correct it. He speaks about tariffs over and over again in an incorrect way. He'd rather believe the thing he originally stated so that he can believe he's always right than just learning something. Just read one thing in your life. We are so appreciative of the thousands and thousands of people who've been subscribing every single day. So let's keep it going. Our race to 1 million subscribers. We're getting so close. Any of you who haven't already, please do click that subscribe button. Back to the video. Here's more.
The implications of being able to be baited so easily that all Kamala Harris needed to do was dangle a few things out there, a few crowd size, a few rallies. Your dad gave you money, and he would she would hook.
It's crazy, yeah. Those are the kind of guys you want to negotiate against, because you can be in a negotiation for any type of business or any type of circumstances, and just hit them with something that's going to piss them off or freak them out, and you have the edge, right? Because they're going to lose some of their confidence, and they're going to lose some of their objectivity, and they're going to lose some of their mind. So it's a huge edge.
Well, that goes against the message that he's trying to convey, which is that you want him in the negotiating room against the tough partners. Can you talk in that dichotomy there?
Sure. Oh, of course, right? I mean, it's not like Putin or Xi or any leader of a nation state didn't pay attention, right, and didn't notice what happened. And so, of course, now you might be more subtle in how you approach it. It could be like leaving something on a table in front of Trump, say Trump crowd size is down 30%. You might not have to say a word, right? It could be someone saying something to one of the other people in the room, right? An assistant talking to an assistant. Boy, we're really sorry to hear that Donald Trump's crowd sizes have fallen, and then just sets everything off. It's just so easy, that's a problem.
That's another less emphasized point that we've come back to now a few times, that is so small and so big at the same time, which is, on one end you think, oh, that was funny seeing Trump so triggered when Harris mocked him for his small crowd sizes. And to be clear, he has big crowds often, but they've just compared to Harris seemed small and people will leave. But that's not even the point. The point is, Trump got angry and got flustered because she brought that up. But there's a bigger point to it, other than almost a petty, hilarious, satisfying thing we got to observe. There's also the really important part, which is if Trump can be played like a fiddle, like that by Harris, if she can manipulate him like that, not just doing so in the moment, but doing so after weeks of reporting that that's what she was going to do and he couldn't prepare himself, is that who we want with that lack of impulse control? Obviously with the nuclear codes, but also negotiating with people? Because Mark Cuban's saying in his experience in business, that's the best person to deal with, is someone as sensitive and manipulatable as Trump. Next moment.
You had an economy where folks like me with a lot of money truly benefited, and there's an inflationary value to assets that we owned. The people who do the work, they didn't have this big beneficial gain. The tax rates didn't help them all that much, right? The prices, while they weren't high, no one was put in a better position to succeed.
When you look at the business community, I think there is
that, referring to Trump's economy, something we've talked about a lot. Sure, his big tax cut bill really made a lot of people who have a lot of money happy. But while he sold it as something that benefited working class Americans, it didn't.
Just really don't matter right now in this election, right? I think that
to have no avowed support from any of these CEOs.
So I'll say this, and it's a little bit off path from what you're getting to. Parties really don't matter right now in this election, right? I think we saw Donald Trump just take over the Republican Party, right? Mitt Romney was the candidate before him. He's nothing like Mitt Romney. He just took it over and made it his. We're seeing the same thing with Kamala, right? This is not about Democratic ideas. This is about Kamala Harris's values and relating to the American people. The opportunity economy, that's what makes this so amazing. And I think that's why so many big business people have gravitated to support the VP, because they understand that Kamala, her values are what are going to make her different. Her values are what makes her stand apart from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, for that matter. She wants to bring people together, and that's so different from what Donald Trump wants, and that's what companies need in order to be successful. When there's partisanship and division, it's hard to run a business. I gave a speech this morning, right, where I had a conversation, and one of the things they said is don't talk about the election, because we have Republicans that work here, or I should say Trump supporters and Harris supporters, and she understands that. And the CEOs understand that in order to be optimally successful, you need an united country.
And I want to mention, as we continue to go through this, full interview on Brian Tyler Cohen's channel. I encourage you to watch the full thing as well. There, I think Trump has changed the Republican Party more than Harris has changed the Democratic Party. It's not the same there, but I really do resonate with the point about this election not being about parties. The way he explained it was a little bit different. The way that I explain it is, given the constitutional and democratic elements that are on the line, and how, regardless of where you stand on policy, we can all agree, we can't all agree, apparently. We should all be able to agree, but a lot of Republicans, independents, and Democrats can agree on our constitutional values and how we should prioritize those. So let's vote for that. And then if we get past MAGA and the Republican Party stands for something that's for the Constitution but different on policy, then we're back to a more normal political debate. So that's one of the reasons the parties don't matter so much. But you also have Harris using language and building policy proposals that aren't abandoning the Democratic Party's previous values, but are definitely appealing to different groups. When you listen to her talks about working class tax cuts, her prioritization of discussing what she wants to do on small businesses, even a phrase that people have picked out, the most lethal fighting force in the world, talking about our military and the emphasis of freedom and patriotism. While these aren't actually changes, as I've been explaining for years now, from the policies that often Democrats, especially compared to Republicans, implement, But it is different in the rhetoric and the branding. Finally, yes, because I've been waiting for that for quite some time. Harris is doing a really nice job of it. And that provides, because so many people don't vote just based off the on-paper policy prescriptions, but instead off of the vibes and the branding that they're getting from either side, that provides a more comfortable option for people who want to be voting for the party of patriotism and strength in the world, military-wise, and freedom and liberty. And that is now more aligning with the Democratic Party's branding, even if it's been more aligned with the policies for quite some time.
We have no idea where Donald Trump is going. And Kamala Harris has recognized there are frailties and imperfections in the current government. And she's going to do the work to make it so that this is not only great for business, but for the people who work for those businesses and have their own lives they're trying to live.
So the flip side of these CEOs and businesses that we've been talking about is the Silicon Valley billionaires, and a lot of them are going more and more not only toward Trump but outspokenly toward Trump. So what's driving this move to the right? Is it just money? Is it just tax rate, or is it something a little bit more insidious?
It's something, I don't know if it's insidious, but yeah, it probably is. First, let me say there's a lot who are switching back. They just won't say it. Because I'm having those conversations, right? Because I think Joe Biden's administrator made a mistake where he would not even talk to people in Silicon Valley, wouldn't even have a conversation. Kamala is the exact opposite, right? If it's not her, it's people in her campaign that are talking to these folks who felt like, if I can't talk to the administration at all, how can I make sure that we're aligned? Well, Kamala's having those conversations. And I can tell you, I've talked to multiple people who were on those lists of people who supported Trump, who ain't supporting Trump no more. But back to answer your question, I think they believe they can manipulate him. I think they understand that he's so transactional and so devoid of core values that anything that they want, they can manipulate him to get. Now,
right. By the way, I am not super familiar with Mark Cuban. I know, obviously, the Shark Tank stuff and Dallas Mavericks and that deep. But watching him now making more public appearances and his strong advocacy for Harris, I did not realize how compelling of a communicator he is. Just hearing and watching the full interview, you really notice he's a really enjoyable person to listen to break down some of these things, and he can get to interesting angles on things that we've considered plenty of times, but not that little part of it. And so, without giving a full endorsement, because I don't know his whole history, I am enjoying him on the scene in that sense. I did want to mention as well, Trump could, in so many ways, cost himself this election because of his bizarre, anti-strategic impulsiveness. And that comes in many ways, one of them being he could get a lot more business leaders to support him, thus millions of dollars flowing to his campaign that can make the difference in what's going to be a really close election. If he would just tone down some of the crazy economic proposals. Because, for example, his across the board, what was it, 10%? They said, maybe I'll do 20% tariffs on all foreign imports. That scares the you-know-what out of business leaders because their businesses would suffer a lot from that. And so then he's pushing with that and other radical things. He's saying that he doesn't have to. It's not appealing to voters that much. He could make the same points without making the specific policy proposals, but he's alienated them and pushing them towards Harris, where they're funneling money towards her. And when the economic analyses are done, one after another is saying that Harris's economy would do way better than a Trump economy, and a Trump economy would see a recession with the proposals he's talking about. And so that's another way he's just shooting himself in the foot completely. Here's more.
Roy Cohen's School of Management, right? You demonize and demonize and demonize and give credit to nobody else. And that is the antithesis of good leadership. That's the antithesis of good character. That's the antithesis of being ethical. That's who Donald Trump is. I've known him for 25 years. I'm never going to say we were best friends, but he is the most unethical, lacks character, dishonest person I've ever done business with or worked with.
Why does that matter, though? Like, people are going to look at that and say, I don't care, he's an asshole.
And they do,
but he's our
He's my asshole. Yeah,
right?
yeah. Character is destiny, right? You don't know. The one thing about the presidency of the United States, you don't know what's coming next. The past is no predictor of the future. You have no idea what the next problem is you have to deal with on a small or large basis, like COVID for that matter, right? And you want somebody who has character, because that has empathy, that has a willingness to learn and understand. And you want somebody that is ethical when it comes to making difficult decisions. I can't even imagine why people consider Donald Trump because of his lack of character and ethics. Because when that tough time comes to make a decision, he's only going to listen to himself. And we've seen how that works out. We saw it worked on the debate. Right? He's not going to listen to anybody for a debate, right? And when he's...
Yeah, this is something we've discussed a lot with people's downplaying of the importance of character with Trump. I don't care. He can be a terrible person. I like his policies, as incoherent as they are. And what happens is that phrase, character is destiny, sums it up nicely, but you might not know how, but most likely that's going to bite you in the butt. And it did, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of deaths during COVID. Meaning, people thought Trump's being handed a really solid economy from Obama after recovering, and he kind of just could sit there, be a little crazy, cut taxes, and it'll appear to be doing fine because of what he was handed, and then he could be fine. It'd be fine. People will think he's a good president. But then we got hit by COVID. We didn't know, obviously, that was going to be the thing. But often as the United States president, something's going to hit. A crisis that necessitates leadership. And if we had had a president with high character in office, I'm blanking now on the institution that did the study, but we just recently mentioned a study that talked about how much more people died in the United States due to COVID because of Trump's mishandling, direct decisions he was making, and how, looking at comparable countries, how much higher our death rate was during Trump's tenure. And then that, because we weren't getting the public health crisis under control, exacerbated the economic problems, exacerbated the crime spike. And then the second that Biden-Harris got into office, it was their job to pick up the pieces and solve those problems. And they did so in a way that outperformed a lot of those same countries. And while MAGA tries to abstract that, what that also reminds us of, separate from all the points I make about the economic metrics and how people misunderstand that crime is actually lower and all that, that shows us why it's so important, as someone's calling me over here. Let's turn that off. Why it's so important that leaders have character. Because Trump chose his own political advantage. It was a bad judgment call. He could have taken it seriously and benefited politically, but instead he chose what he thought was better, which was downplaying, not taking it seriously. And he's just not a thoughtful, smart, reasonable person who can manage a crisis like that. And so we suffered significantly. The data shows. And that's what Mark Cuban's talking about. You don't know how, but when you give the most powerful position to someone who doesn't have anything resembling high character, you're going to suffer most likely. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you thought. Again, you can find that interview on Brian Tyler Cohen's YouTube channel. Really fascinating, the full thing. And support this show by clicking the join button below.